This live SLU show is brought to you by the support of SLU members and the following sponsors. Visit SLU.com to become a member today.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to SLU. I'm Paul Cox, and this tonight is the first of a whole series of shows that we've got over the next 4 weeks, which will blow your mind. We are so excited about some of these shows coming up, but tonight is all about Supermoon. We are going to tell you what a supermoon is. We're going to tell you, will it cause earthquakes and floods? Hopefully not. We're going to be joined by Bob Berman, SLU's astronomer. He's going to tell us all the facts about this, but we're also going to talk about the cultural significance of the moon and what it kind of means to man. And we've got some fantastic views of the moon tonight. This one is live from the SLU Canary Islands Observatory. That's off the west coast of Africa. And that looks like a daytime shot. This is a live shot. You can see the dome is on the left-hand side. That's where our mighty half-meter telescope is. But that bright orb in the sky isn't the sun. That is the supermoon. And you can see it's so bright tonight that it's making the whole sky blue. In fact, I can't even see any of the brightest stars in there. But we've also got images tonight, a live image stream coming in from our Chile Observatory, SLU's Southern Hemisphere Observatory, and the moon there has only just been rising. And I'm talking to you from SLU HQ in Connecticut, and we've just been watching the supermoon rising here as well. And there you can see the all-sky view from our Chile Observatory. There it is, and we can see some stars in that one, just about. But we've also got some absolutely fabulous images of supermoon through the actual telescopes as well. And we've got a variety of telescopes this evening for you. We've got the mighty half-meter telescope. We've also got the 17-inch telescope, which gives us some fantastic views of this huge moon. And then we've got some closer up shots using our Chile high magnification telescope. So there is the time lapse from earlier on today of the SLU Canary Islands Observatory. Why are we looking down on the clouds? Well, we're looking down on the clouds because the observatory is a world-class observatory site. Some of the best telescopes in the world are here, and it's above the clouds. It's 8,000 feet high in the sky. But anyway, let's have a look at what else we're going to be covering in the show. We've got the human connection to the moon. So we're going to be talking about, the cultural significance of the moon down the ages, all the way through up to the Apollo era. We're also going to do a bit of a back to basics. What is the supermoon? What makes this one special tonight? And is there anything more special coming up later on in the month? And I can already answer that question. Yes, if you've got any questions for us, or you've got your own Supermoon Rising photos that you can share, then use the hashtag SLUSupermoon. But now I'm going to ask to be joined by Bob Berman, the SLU astronomer extraordinaire. Bob, can you hear me?
I hear you loud and clear, Paul. Good to be here.
Listen, let's, in the first instance, can you explain to viewers why we're seeing the moon kind of virtually overhead from the Canary Islands, but in the Chilean sky um, camera, we saw it only just rising above the horizon, didn't we?
Well, that's because SLU can prove to everybody that we really live on a sphere, on a ball, on a globe, that Earth is curved. So, depending upon where you are, you're either facing the moon right now, or the moon's just right on the horizon coming up, or perhaps you're even over the curve of the Earth where you're not even seeing it yet. So, that's so cool that in moments, in seconds, you can switch, Paul, from one observatory to the other and see the moon at different heights in the sky. Yep, proof we live on a ball.
Absolutely. And as amazing as some of these shots that we're going to have tonight are, we would urge all of you, not during the show, but after the show, if the moon hasn't already risen, or actually if it has already risen for you, go outside and see this for yourself. You know, Bob will talk about the best times of the month to observe the moon, but go out there yourself and make that connection, that personal connection with what you're seeing. So, Bob, on that note, you know, humans have been looking at the moon for millennia as soon as we could turn our heads skyward. Why do you think it remains such a captivating object for us?
Well, it was life and death, of course, right from the beginning. There is only one moon in the sky. It's very rare to have only one. We're the only planet with just one moon, and it so changes the night that it was life and death, Paul. Back in the old days, if you were living in a cave on a dark night, well, there were lots of predators that had better eyesight than we did, and if you were going out on a date, that date could end early, by being eaten. So on the night of the full moon, at least now you could see who the enemies were. You could see better, and so that's maybe why we went out on courtship times. You know what, Paul? Maybe that's why the human menstrual cycle matches the phase of the moon. Maybe it's not a coincidence, even though only two animals have that same cycle matching the 29 and a half day period from full moon to the next full moon, and that's the human and the opossum. But why should it be? If it's not coincidence, maybe humans slowly changed our cycles so that we would be fertile at the time of the month when we dared go out and pay
And we
house
know that
visits.
there's an awful lot of nature is connected directly to the lunar cycle. Now, Bob, we're going to be talking about, I'd like to hear a little bit more about some of man's earliest recordings of the moon, maybe some cave paintings or something like this. But let's call up some of these live images, which we haven't seen yet. What have we got here? This is the high magnification telescope in the Canary Islands. What do you make of that, Bob?
Well, it's very cool. Full moon, look how round it looks, which is another reason why the ancient cultures loved it so much, because the circle was always considered the divine shape, the perfect shape. After all,
Yeah.
trace that boundary, and no part of the circumference is any closer to the center than any other. We still have a legacy of that in things like the exchange of wedding rings, where that circle is worshipped. And the moon happens to be the roundest thing that we ever look at in nature. It's 2,160 miles wide, only 4 miles out of round, one part in 500, which means that no human eye can detect the out of roundness of the
Out of
moon.
roundness.
If,
Wow.
yeah,
And
yeah.
we, of course, during a total, one of my favorite views of the moon is during a total solar eclipse when we can actually see Bailey's beads and those little bits of light coming through. And I guess that shows just how perfect a sphere the moon is, Bob.
Yes, just beautiful. One part in 500. I mean, and it all depends on the time of full moon. Now, the real full moon happened a few hours ago, so it's if you see it ever so slightly out of round, that's because the moon has now had what 8, 9, 10 hours to move from the moment of fullness. But if you catch a full moon within a few hours of when it's full, my goodness, there is nothing rounder in nature that you're likely to see. A lovely view, this close-up view.
Well,
It also
we're going to
shows the evenness of the lighting on the moon, which is very cool too.
we are going to be showing viewers the different views from all of the telescopes tonight of this supermoon. So, Bob, let's go back. Let's take a step back. The earliest civilizations, well, what's recorded? What do we know about the earliest recordings of the moon and how man has related to the moon?
Well, the very earliest, I'm thinking back to the earliest pyramids, which were not the main pyramids, at in
These are
Giza,
the
but
stepped ones that you're talking about. Yes.
yes, and the earlier ones had more rounded steps, probably from erosion, and even they had little moon symbols on them. Certainly, the Native Americans, every full moon had their own name. We don't do that anymore. We don't say, well, this month it's the strawberry moon, and this full moon is the wolf moon. But the Native Americans did. Every moon was worshipped and paid attention to on its own. So in primitive times, the Maya paid a lot of focus on the moon, hurling their least favorite in-laws from the pyramids at that time, and no wonder. And here's something that just occurred to me. Did you know that 10 lunations, 10 full moons from one to the other is exactly the same average period between conception and birth, the same time frame that a woman carries a child, so that if you were born, Paul, if you were conceived at a full moon, odds are you were born on the full moon as well.
There seem to be some connections here, Bob, that we still don't really fully understand. We don't know whether or not it's just us picking up some patterns, which human beings love to do, or whether or not there is
Yes.
this direct connection. And I have to say, I err on the side of thinking that it's just that we don't fully understand it yet.
It,
We
it,
see
it
so
could be,
much, don't
but
we, in
either
nature?
way, either way, it explains why the moon is associated with fertility, and
Yeah,
as often as not, the as a god, the woman, it's female names, women's names that are given to the moon rather than masculine names, and so you can see where the connection is. The sun is the male, the moon is the female, and the full moon exemplifies this. This is the phase that doesn't fool around. Not to mention, as you know, look at this. You see
yeah,
always women associated with the
yes.
full moon. Plus, the full moon is the only phase that is out all night long. It rises at sunset, which is what we're watching right now. It's at its highest when the sun is lowest, and it sets at sunrise. So here it is, dominating the night.
Yeah, and I didn't actually realize that until this evening, actually, that the Egyptians they never really worshipped the moon. They worshipped the sun, but they did have lunar gods, didn't they? And here we see them.
Yes, this is a little outside my field, and I've seen paintings and drawings like this as you have, but what it exemplifies is that there was no time in history that the full moon was not central, as it should have been, because it dominates the night. It dominates our lives. In the era before there was electricity, and it wasn't that long ago, even in the United States, when rural electrification finally came. So we're talking, only half a century ago, that the moon made a big difference. These days it's irrelevant in cities. You hardly see the moon through the canyons of the skyscrapers and such with all the bright city lights. But it wasn't long ago that all the difference in the world between a moonlit night and a non-moonlit night. And the night of the full moon, well, that's when you could do things, including harvesting. That's why the harvest moon plays such a role there.
And that's one of the shows that we're going to be telling viewers about. We've got coming up in September. Wow, that's exciting. But here we are. We're back at this high magnification telescope view, Bob, of this beautiful supermoon. And we're going to be we're going to be going back to basics and have a Supermoon 101 in a short
Mhm.
while. But before we move away from maybe some of the cultural aspects of the moon and how man has reacted to the moon down the ages, let's bring ourselves not really up to date because it's 40 years ago, but let's put ourselves up to the 60s and 70s and the Apollo program. Now, I think you've written books about the Apollo program and you've been very fortunate to interview quite a few Apollo astronauts. But what was the cultural significance back then, do you think? Do you think it was just about the Cold War?
That played a big role, of course. It was the only thing left to beat the Russians at. They were the first orbiting spacecraft, the first man in space, the first animal in space, the first woman in space, the first pair of astronauts. Kennedy had to decide what was left. What
Yeah.
could we beat them at that they hadn't already done? And the answer was getting to the moon, because here you couldn't just modify an existing rocket. You really had to start from scratch. And that's why the Saturn V was designed, the mightiest rocket ever built, even more powerful than the poor late departed space shuttles. But
Mm.
wow, what a rocket! Even though the first stage only lasted for 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Can you imagine that? Each one of the 5 engines burned 3,000 pounds of fuel per second. What a rocket! So yes, it
Mm.
changed our culture. It's us. It's Americans. I
I
mean,
mean, it
I hear from
pervaded the
your
whole of pop culture, didn't it? I mean, it was perfectly timed for pop culture and music and art and everything really grabbed hold of that entire program. But Bob, I can't help feeling that every time I look up at the moon, even now, it's not so familiar that I kind of look up at it and I think what it's criminal that we haven't set foot on that, our closest neighbor, for how long now? It's over 40 years, isn't it?
yes, 72, December of 72 was the final the mission. But you know what? The main thing is, whether we go there or not, is that we did it. And here's a celestial body, the only celestial body that some
Yeah.
of our representatives, 1 dozen of us humans, have walked on the moon. And just to have done that, no matter what happens in the future, wow, how did we pull that off? How do you start with just looking around you on Earth, and what do you see on the ground? Leaves, maple leaves, twigs, some rocks, maybe some metal that you could melt down. How do you start with that and end up on the moon? So,
Mm.
wow, we did it. We as humans, as mammals, as life forms. You don't even have to say as Americans, although certainly we're proud as Americans to have done this. Um, and then we brought a car to the moon. I was in India during that first mission where we had the lunar rover there, and a British person, one of your compatriots, looked
Mm.
over my shoulder reading the paper, and he said, "Can't you Americans go anywhere without a car?"
I have to say, Bob, out of everything that captivated me as a boy with the Apollo program was seeing the lunar rovers tear across the lunar surface. And actually, I've been a bit of a petrol head ever since, but I think they were electric. Weren't they the early, probably one of the earliest electric cars, in fact, the lunar rovers? So
Yes,
now,
absolutely.
Bob,
And they had built in the ability to return to the starting point, which was a good idea. And
what do you mean
because the horizon on the moon
automatically
is
or?
oh yeah, yes, because the lunar horizon is less than a mile away, so you very quickly lose sight of the lunar lander, which wasn't very tall to begin with. And yes, you could follow your tracks in the deep lunar regolith, or dust on the moon. But the lunar rover had the ability. You press a button and it would return to its starting point. Still, they still didn't trust it. You know that they had a rule that they were not allowed to drive farther than these guys could walk back,
Really?
just to be on the safe
Wow.
side, yes.
So,
Or
so all
rather
of this
hop back. Yeah.
automated cars, driverless cars, that people are trying to invent now, it's kind of old hat. NASA did it, 40 years ago.
Yes, yes. Yeah, absolutely wonderful. And there it is. Yeah, that's the iconic picture. Look how little color there is on the moon. This is an odd thing, how gray it is. They
Mm.
wasted color film in a way. You can see that a little a bit of color on the flag on the astronaut's spacesuit there shows that this really is a color image. And yet, the lunar terrain is so gray. It's just about the grayest object in the known universe, thanks to
Well,
that composition of the
Bob,
lunar
we are
soil.
going to do a bit of a back to basics moon and a back to basics supermoon to explain what a supermoon is, and also, is it going to cause earthquakes, floods in the morning, maybe, or overnight? We're going to be talking about that in a short while. But first of all, I wanted to tell viewers. I've said it at the top of the show. We have got some absolutely amazing shows coming up, and we do some pretty amazing stuff here at SLU over the last 12 years since we first launched. But this particular month coming up, Bob, I'm looking forward to more than anything. We have just launched a new series of shows, almost they're going to be every night. At the moment they're every 2 night. They're called Nightlight, 10 p.m. Eastern time every night. live views from one of the telescopes, and they're absolutely fantastic shows. Great, fascinating factoids and stuff like that. So that's 10 p.m. That's going to be every single night. But on Monday, we've got Neptune at opposition. I'm going to ask you about that in a second. We've also got this month, in September, a partial solar eclipse from the tip of Africa. And then we've got a really, really big show for everyone. And this is related to Apollo, which we've just been talking about. We have got a joint show with NASA, and we are going to be looking at the International Space Station in a way that you have never, ever seen it before. We are going to be tracking it through some high-powered telescopes in our network of telescopes in Europe, and we're going to be seeing some close-up video of the space station whizzing overhead. So we've also got astronaut Katie Coleman coming on that show. And the reason why we're doing that show is because on the 15th, it marks the halfway point of a year in space for astronaut Scott Kelly. Then later on in the show, later on in the month, we've got 24 hours of sunshine we're going to bring you for vernal equinox. We've got Earth and sun cams around the globe, and we are going to be watching the sun 24 hours on vernal equinox. We're really excited about that. But Bob, the one I'm really looking forward to comes up at the end of the month, and it's mega harvest moon eclipse. So not only is it bigger than supermoon, it's also the harvest moon, and it's also a total lunar eclipse. How cool is that going to be? Listen,
that's as cool as it gets.
It is. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit overexcited here, but I am so looking forward to that event. Now, we're going to take a short break, but after that, we are going to be talking about the moon, its orbit. Why is tonight a supermoon? Why is it called a supermoon? We're going to be talking about its orbit, why it's particularly big tonight, and also whether or not it's going to cause some earthquakes and floods by the morning. We'll see you very soon. Welcome back, everybody. This is Slew, and we are looking at the supermoon tonight from our Canary Islands Observatory. We've also got images coming in from our Chile Observatory, and hopefully we can actually get one of the images from the Canary Islands half-meter telescope up, because it's going to illustrate part of what we're going to be talking about now. Why this is supermoon, what creates a supermoon. And Bob, now 2 weeks ago, we were looking at the moon through this same telescope here, and it wasn't chopped off like that. It wasn't cropped like that. What's going on? Why is tonight a supermoon, and why can't we see the entirety of the moon in this particular image tonight?
Well, it changes its distance. The ellipse is the favored shape in the solar system. Very few orbits are circular. All right, Venus's orbit around the sun, and the 4 Galilean moons of Jupiter that we love watching here at SLU, they're almost perfect circles. But by and large, almost everything gets closer and farther away, and the moon does that with a vengeance. What a lot of people don't realize is that its orbit itself changes shape. It's not even a fixed orbit. And there are sometimes that the lunar close point moves even closer than usual. And that's what's happening now. So we can have a 7% change from the average in the size of the moon. It's not enough so that, you know, the way it's hyped often in the media that you'd look up and there's this giant thing that fills a third of the sky.
Yeah.
No, it's not like that, but here it is. It's enough definitely to make a difference, and definitely to affect the tides. Will there be flooding? Well, the time of full moon is already the spring tide configuration, because the moon and the sun and the earth are in a straight line. And on the day of the full moon, that is today, and especially on the day after, which is tomorrow, you get your highest tides of the month. Now, if the moon is unusually close, because tidal forces vary inversely, not with the square of distance, but with the cube of distance. So Earth's oceans and tides are very, very susceptible to a moon changing its distance. So you've got everything for extraordinary tides. Now, most places, okay, you'll see a tide come closer to the boardwalk, let's say at high tide, move farther away and expose a lot of the shore. Nice for clammers, nice for people who like walking out on all the muddy stretches of beach that are normally not exposed. Look at this. But
So Bob,
will
just
it
on the
cause
screen at the
flooding?
moment, we've
Maybe.
got this diagram, and this is showing this elliptical orbit. So you told us that the moon is the most spherically perfect orb that we can see, but its orbit isn't perfect. So it's this elliptical orbit. So sometimes it's closer, sometimes it's further away. But it has to coincide, doesn't it, with a full moon. So when it's at its closest, that's when we call it a supermoon, isn't it?
Yes, that's what's been the term for the last few years. In truth, if it were a new moon and it were that close, it would have the identical effect. So either new moon or full moon, the important thing that is that it's lined up with the Earth or the Sun, and it's at its closest point to us. And now we have its second closest point of the year to us. So we have everything in place for extraordinarily high tides. Now, to make flooding tides, usually you need one more extra ingredient like a storm or onshore winds. A lot of people don't realize this, but a 1 inch drop in air pressure produces a 1 foot rise in the ocean. So if you get a low pressure system, the ocean will rise up, and then that'll often be the straw that breaks the camel's back, and you'll get really serious, unfortunate floods. But everything is all primed for it right now, tonight
It
and
is.
tomorrow.
Now, let's go back to some of the live images that we had, because I want to urge SLU members to make a collection of lunar images over the entire lunar month, because you'll actually see the size, the apparent size of the moon change, get larger and smaller. And Bob, there's another difference that they'll see from one night to another, isn't there? It's a little bit of a rock. What makes the moon rock like that?
Well, something called libration, and that's two factors. Number one, the moon's orbit as it goes around on the ecliptic plane, that is, it orbits around us in the same plane we go around the sun, but it's tilted 5 degrees to that plane. So sometimes when it's at the highest point, we can peek around the bottom of the moon a little bit and around to the other side. And when it's on the other side of the orbit, we can look over the top a little bit. So we see a little bit more than half. Plus, its rotation period, Paul, never varies. It's 21.32166 days, never varies by a second. But
That's your encyclopedic knowledge again, Bob, which always absolutely
but
astounds me.
but its orbital speed changes a la Kepler's second law. In other words, when it's closest to us, it's moving faster. When it's at the farthest point from us, 2 weeks from now, it'll be moving slower. So when you combine that absolutely steady rotation with a very unsteady orbital speed, it should be obvious that sometimes as it's rotating, it'll be ahead of things a little bit or behind it a little bit. So we'll be able to peek around one side of the moon or the other. And that also lets us, that gives us the east west component of libration, not libation, which are,
So we
you might
see
be in the
more,
mood.
don't we? We do see more of half of the moon's sphere because
We
of
do
this
almost
libration.
60%. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. And one of the greatest ways is using our slew images. That mare or dark blotch on the right side of the field of view, that's mare crisium, and it's really great to compare that. I wonder if we could switch back to our. There it is. There it
Yep.
is. This is
Yep.
a nice view from our Arcelli telescope. See that perfectly round dark blotch on the exactly at the 3 o'clock position on the right side of the moon. Well,
Yep.
sometimes you'll see that pretty much right on the edge of the moon, and sometimes there'll be a lot of white space between it. So that's a nice marker to be able to see the degree of libration of the moon, of whether you've got, as the moon appears to wobble in that orbit around us.
And that previous shot was from one of the Chile telescopes. So that's operating tonight and giving us those wonderful close-up views. And I just reiterate to viewers what I said at the beginning of the show. It's great looking at these images through SLU, and it's even greater if, like us here in Connecticut, we're clouded out so we can't see it ourselves. But if you've got clear skies tonight, go outside and just gaze up at the moon and remind yourself what an absolutely amazing object it is and how wonderful it is to gaze at. And maybe think about some of the things we've talked about tonight. The last time man stepped foot on the moon, 1972, you said, Bob.
Yeah, December of that year. Do you have coyotes there in Connecticut?
I don't know. I haven't been here long enough, but
Oh,
I'm
because
hoping not,
increasingly
seeing
here in
as
the
it's dark.
Northeast, we've been hearing them react to the moon. I mean, they're howling up a storm. So, yep, it's
Excellent,
not just
excellent.
us
Now,
humans. A lot of us mammals are affected.
now, Bob, we did say that we were going to tell people about earthquakes. Now, this comes from, it kind of feels logical that if the moon is going to be closer to the Earth tonight and over these few nights, that its gravity would be affecting uh, Earth's mantle more than it would normally. So, are we going to expect this kind of supermoon to generate earthquakes?
Probably not. I saw a study some years ago showing that there was a little bit more of a probability of a major quake during proxigean moons, when the moon was close at perigee and it was Fuller knew that those moons did correlate with times of earthquakes more than would be expected by chance, but it's a very small correlation. Most of the time, it doesn't happen because an earthquake would have to be right on the edge, and that's because the whole gravity caused by the moon is only 1/5000th the stresses already found in crustal rock. So
Right.
it's a very small effect, but it can be the straw that breaks the camel's back if an earthquake's already right on the edge of happening.
But generally, we can sleep tight tonight then.
Right. Very unlikely anything will happen.
So here we are. Here we are with this fabulous view. I never get fed up seeing the moon through Sloo's giant telescopes in the Canary Islands. These are high resolution images. So, Sloo astronomer members, make sure that you set up a moon mission and take your own snaps of these, and you can zoom in and zoom in. And what I actually do, Bob, on some of these high resolution images from the half-meter telescope, I pull them up full screen on my laptop, and I zoom in and I just pan across them, and sometimes it can feel so three-dimensional. You can kind of get a little bit lost in it. But anyway, Bob, we have got these shows coming up. Now that you're doing this show on Monday night, which is moon themed, isn't it? But it's not our moon. What can you tell us about Monday night show?
Yeah, quite right. We're going to be looking at the giant moon of Neptune named Triton. Odd moon. You know, when Neptune was discovered in 1846, uh, a moon was discovered just 17 days later, and it strangely had no name. Nobody gave it a name. And it wasn't until the 1930s that people started calling it Triton, named after that three
Yeah,
pointed staff that the god of the sea, Neptune, carries with him. So we're going to look at Triton, which is an amazing satellite, the only one that orbits in the wrong direction,
that's right.
orbits backwards. It also has a perfectly circular orbit, which is strange. That's very unlike our moon, and some other strange features too. So imagine that. We're going to look at the moon of the most distant planet in our solar system. And
We're
right
looking
now we're
forward to
looking
that.
at the closest moon, and that night we're going to be looking at the farthest.
Yep, and we can actually see it. We will see it in the Sloo telescope view. So that's going to be a fabulous night. Let me remind you what else we've got coming up. It really is September. Wow. It should be Super September or something like that. So Monday night, we have got Neptune at opposition, as Bob's just been talking about. Sloo members, don't forget you can watch Nightlight every other night at 10 p.m. Eastern. Live telescope views and fantastic factoids. We've got some fantastic music that plays in the background of that as well. We love that. And then we've got some really big shows coming up. We've got the partial solar eclipse. We're bringing you that from the very southernmost tip of Africa. And there's a show where we're going to be talking about its implications down the ages and man's connection to solar eclipses. We've then got our big NASA International Space Station show. This is going to be a unique show. We don't think this has ever been done before. We're going to be looking at the International Space Station as it makes a pass over Europe, we're going to have a string of telescopes, high-powered telescopes, watching the International Space Station as it goes over. And it only lasts a few minutes. We will explain to you how you too can see the International Space Station from your own backyard. We have got astronaut Katie Coleman on that show. It's going to be absolutely brilliant. And then at the end of the month, we have our mega harvest moon eclipse. Now, that's going to be the next full moon, isn't it, Bob? The mega harvest moon eclipse on the night of the 27th. It's actually on the 28th, but it's the night of the 27th.
Yes, and that's, I think, the most astounding lunar eclipse ever that I can remember. I don't recall ever seeing a harvest moon eclipse, let alone the harvest moon coming to its closest point of the entire year. And at that moment, the moment of full moon and harvest moon, it going into a total eclipse.
Yeah.
Wow. Very
It's going to
cool.
be absolutely amazing. Now, the other great thing about that eclipse is it's visible from certainly Western Europe. It's perfectly placed for our Canary Islands Observatory, so the telescopes are being trained on it that night. But also, people in North America and South America, Bob, it's visible there as well, isn't it?
The whole country except for Hawaii and Alaska. Yes, all of the United States will see it.
So what we would recommend to you is that you get together. We're going to have a big party here at SLU HQ for that lunar eclipse. What we recommend you to do is have your own lunar eclipse party. We still want you to use us as your soundtrack. So when you're outside watching the lunar eclipse with your own eyes and making that personal connection to it, you can listen to us and we'll be explaining everything you need to know about a mega harvest moon eclipse. My word,
Yes.
I can't ever remember, Bob, so many different things coming together, so many different phenomena
Yes.
coming together for a show like that.
Right. And that month we'll talk about librations and libations too. We'll celebrate.
Okay. Well, I look forward to the libations, certainly. We've got some other great stuff as well. SLU members, keep your eyes open in the SLU Clubhouse, because we've got, coming up this week actually, Comets 141P Matcholtz, which was actually discovered by a SLU member, Don Matcholtz, would you believe? And Rosetta's Comet 67P. They are going to be appearing within the same telescope view at the same time. Bob, I don't think you knew about this one, did you?
No, I didn't. That's very
It's
cool.
an absolutely amazing sight. They're called comet rendezvous, when you get to see two comets passing in the night. So we're going to be watching it over a couple of hours, and they will literally be passing in our field of view. How great is that? So, Bob, what can you leave us with about our supermoon tonight, and what would you recommend people do out there, viewers?
Well, if you have clear skies tonight, you're seeing the again the second closest. It's only by a few miles, largest moon of the year. And remember that a mere month from now, it'll be the very closest. So we're going to have a very unusual thing of two full moons that come extraordinarily close. But, take what you can get. If it's clear tonight, grab it. This moon is going to be out
Absolutely.
all night long. The moon is the only phase, the only lunar phase that is out all night long. You're going to not see it set until dawn.
Yeah.
So this is the night.
Well, I hope everybody's enjoyed these fantastic views. This, as a reminder, is a live view from our Chile telescopes in the southern hemisphere. This is our high magnification telescope. That's a pretty good image, isn't it, Bob, to end the show on?
Oh, I love it. Look at the top. You see that curved line, that mountain chain? Those are the lunar Apennines, and they curve right towards that giant white crater that's almost 60 miles across. That's the Great Copernicus. You see those white lines coming out of it, rays explosively thrown in all directions from a very recent lunar impact. So all these features, some people say, well, you can't really see detail during the full moon. All you see are the dark blotches where lava once flowed. But obviously you can if the
We're doing pretty
telescope
well
is...
here, aren't we, with that image? That's for
absolutely,
certain.
absolutely.
So, Well, Bob, thank you very much. As always, your encyclopedic knowledge is, I find, always fascinating. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. Thank you, everybody behind the scenes for this show. I hope you've enjoyed these live views of the moon. Don't forget, check back at slew.com for this run of shows, which are going to be an absolutely fantastic September. So we'll see you again soon.
This live Slew show is brought to you by the support of Slew members and the following sponsors. Visit slew.com to become a member today.
Any of the brightest stars in there, but we've also got images tonight, a live image stream coming in from our Chile observatory, Slew's Southern Hemisphere Observatory, and the moon there has only just been rising. And I'm talking to you from Slew HQ in Connecticut, and we've just been watching the supermoon rising here as well. And there you can see the all-sky view from our Chile observatory. There it is, and we can see some stars in that one just about. But we've also got some absolutely fabulous images of supermoon through the actual telescopes as well. And we've got a variety of telescopes this evening for you. We've got the mighty half-meter telescope. We've also got the 17-inch telescope, which gives us some fantastic views of this huge moon. And then we've got some closer up shots using our Chile high magnification telescope. So there is the time lapse from earlier on today of the Slew Canary Islands Observatory. Why are we looking down on the clouds? Well, we're looking down on the clouds because the observatory is a world-class observatory site. Some of the best telescopes in the world are here, and it's above the clouds. It's 8,000 feet high in the sky. But anyway, let's have a look at what else we're going to be covering in the show. We've got the human connection to the moon. So we're going to be talking about, the cultural significance of the moon down the ages, all the way through up to the Apollo era. We're also going to do a bit of a back to basics. What is the supermoon? What makes this one special tonight? And is there anything more special coming up later on in the month? And I can already answer that question. Yes, if you've got any questions for us, or you've got your own Supermoon Rising photos that you can share, then use the hashtag SlewSupermoon. But now I'm going to ask to be joined by Bob Berman, the Slew astronomer extraordinaire. Bob, can you hear me?
I hear you loud and clear, Paul. Good to be here.
Listen, let's, in the first instance, can you explain to viewers why we're seeing the moon kind of virtually overhead from the Canary Islands, but in the Chile all-sky camera, we saw it only just rising above the horizon, didn't we?
Well, that's because SLU can prove to everybody that we really live on a sphere, on a ball, on a globe, that Earth is curved. So, depending upon where you are, you're either facing the moon right now, or the moon's just right on the horizon coming up, or perhaps you're even over the curve of the Earth where you're not even seeing it yet. So, that's so cool that in moments, in seconds, you can switch, Paul, from one observatory to the other and see the moon at different heights in the sky. Yep, proof we live on a ball.
Absolutely. And as amazing as some of these shots that we're going to have tonight are, we would urge all of you, not during the show, but after the show, if the moon hasn't already risen, or actually if it has already risen for you, go outside and see this for yourself. You know, Bob will talk about the best times of the month to observe the moon, but go out there yourself and make that connection, that personal connection with what you're seeing. So, Bob, on that note, you know, humans have been looking at the moon for millennia as soon as we could turn our heads skyward. Why do you think it remains such a captivating object for us?
Well, it was life and death, of course, right from the beginning. There is only one moon in the sky. It's very rare to have only one. We're the only planet with just one moon, and it so changes the night that it was life and death, Paul. Back in the old days, if you were living in a cave on a dark night, well, there were lots of predators that had better eyesight than we did, and if you were going out on a date, that date could end early, by being.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to SLU. I'm Paul Cox, and this tonight is the first of a whole series of shows that we've got over the next 4 weeks, which will blow your mind. We are so excited about some of these shows coming up, but tonight is all about Supermoon. We are going to tell you what a supermoon is. We're going to tell you, will it cause earthquakes and floods? Hopefully not. We're going to be joined by Bob Berman, SLU's astronomer. He's going to tell us all the facts about this, but we're also going to talk about the cultural significance of the moon and what it kind of means to man. And we've got some fantastic views of the moon tonight. This one is live from the SLU Canary Islands Observatory. That's off the west coast of Africa. And that looks like a daytime shot. This is a live shot. You can see the dome is on the left-hand side. That's where our mighty half-meter telescope is. But that bright orb in the sky isn't the sun. That is the supermoon. And you can see it's so bright tonight that it's making the whole sky blue. In fact, I can't even see